Welcome everyone to the Coralville Library. My name is Mike Jorgensen. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here. We are very excited to have with us Chad Lewis, who was here a number of years ago. I'm sure that no one was here then. It was 2008 or 9, we were thinking, and had a great crowd just like tonight. And we're very excited to have him once more. Tonight he's doing his Paranormal Iowa presentation. He is the author of a number of books, many of which you see over here, and I believe there are more than that too. So be sure to check out the website www.unexplainedresearch.com. Isn't that right? Okay. All right. So I'll just a couple of housekeeping things. There's a lot going on here at the library this month. Tomorrow we have, as part of the Iowa City Book Festival, Roxanne Gay, winner of the Paul Engel Award. So the library will be closing early tomorrow at 5, and the award will be going to her tomorrow evening starting at 7. So feel free to come to that. There is a reception with great food and wine afterwards. So be sure to come to that. And I'm sure there are more things in September. I know that there are, but they escape me for the moment. So stop upstairs and check a newsletter. Thank you again for coming, and welcome, Chad.
Well, hello and welcome. I first want to thank the staff for having me back here this evening, and just as important, all of you who are brave enough to show up to talk about Paranormal Iowa here in the safety of the public library. As you heard, my name is Chad Lewis, and my background is actually in the field of psychology. I did both my bachelor's and master's work in that field. But for the last 20 plus years, I've been traveling the world in search of the strange and unusual. Everything from hunting for vampires over in Transylvania, looking for the Loch Ness Monster, crop circles, UFOs, alien abductions, weird people, weird places, you name it, if it's odd and unusual. Yeah, they also have a Paradise, Michigan, too. You can pick which one you want to go to. But if it's strange and unusual and bizarre, I've traveled the globe in search of it. But tonight, we're going to combine some of my favorite cases of the paranormal. Now, I will give you the background, the folklore, the eyewitness accounts. I'll talk a bit about some of the equipment that we use on our investigation of these places. Heck, I'll even provide you with the directions to these places. But I'm going to leave it up to each and every one of you to travel to these places on your own and determine for yourself whether or not you believe these legends. Now, just by a show of hands, how many of you have seen a program on TV about ghosts or creatures or UFOs? Yes, nearly all of you. And it is fun to hear about these places when they're in New York or Texas, but it's a much different matter when these places are right in your own backyard. So that's what we're going to explore tonight. Some of Iowa's most bizarre cases. We'll take a tour for the next 45 minutes around the entire state, ending up right back here in town. But I do, again, have to warn you, it's much easier watching these places on television than visiting. When you're out in the middle of nowhere and you see that shadowy creature lurking from tree to tree, you simply can't turn to another channel and forget all about it. So with that in mind, let's explore some of the scariest places in Iowa. And when I talk about scary places of your state, I'm not referring to the Iowa football games. This might be the scariest thing you'll see tonight. I'm talking places that science says these things shouldn't exist. Skeptics say they can exist, yet every year hundreds of people in the state are coming face to face with these things. First stop, crop circles or crop formations as we now refer to them. Most people consider these to be only over in England and Europe, but in fact these formations have appeared in nearly every country on the planet and in nearly every type of crop. Oat, wheat, barley, grass, corn, even on ice. Now, thanks to a lot of documentaries during the 1990s, most people think that all crop formations are created by two old British men named Doug and Dave. They said that they created all of these at night with nothing more than a 2x4 and some rope. Well, if they have been creating these things, they've been doing so for a very long time. Here's a carving from the 1600s that tells a story of a farmer wanting to hire some of his neighbors to harvest his crop. But they wanted such a high rate for their fee, he said, "I'd rather have the devil mow my crop than to pay your prices." Of course, the next morning he awoke and found what would be considered a crop circle in his field. And back then, the only explanation was that it was the devil itself that made this. Since then, these formations, as I said, have appeared everywhere, including right here in the Midwest. The first research I did in Iowa on formations was back in 2004 when an Eagle Grove couple contacted me when they discovered this in their backyard. After waking up the night before, they noticed odd things. They felt uneasy. Animals weren't behaving quite right. And then they discovered this this formation in their field. So we went there. We took soil samples and crop samples. Now, I won't get into too much of the scientific literature on crop formations, but what we tend to find in these formations are differences between the affected crop and the control samples that we take every doubling up a foot, 2 feet, 4, etc. We find that they should be the same. You'd think this crop is the same as that. But what we find is not only the affected ones are bent, which of course you would think they were, but the nodes are much different from the controls and the affected. They've been blown out due to some high heat or high radiation. Oftentimes the soil has been completely devoid of moisture in the affected area, but not in the unaffected area. Even the plants themselves tend to be different, that when we look at some of the samples, we see size differences. Which then all begs the question, what is making or who are making these things? And after 20 plus years of researching crop formations, I'm left with more questions than answers. I believe some are hoaxed. I believe some are created by the weather, like we had one in my home state of Wisconsin, and others are simply unexplained. But it's not the only unexplained events you have here in Iowa. One of my favorite categories is that of ghosts, spirits, and apparitions. Now, when I mention a haunted place, many of you might think of a cemetery. Reason being is quite simple. Back when cemeteries were chosen, the land was thought to serve as a portal between our world and the spirit world. So when your loved one passed on, it would just be easier for them to travel from whatever world you believed they'd go to. But regardless of whether or not you believe this theory, the people in Williamson at Stone King Cemetery, they think it's working in reverse, that the living are not moving to the dead, but the dead are coming right into our world. Now, if there's any cemetery that looks like it should be haunted in Iowa, it's this one. It's out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Livestock make some interesting noises at night. In fact, it's so creepy, people have believed that it was featured in the movie Children of the Corn, which it was not. But I'll let you watch the 10,000 sequels they made of it to see if it truly is in any of the other movies. It's not. But that hasn't stopped the stories, because the stories involve disembodied voices being heard, all kinds of odd lights floating through the cemetery, changing in size, shape, and color as they maneuver through. But my favorite part of this legend is the dare. Tonight you're going to hear several dares, people who dare one another to do things at these locations. The dare is, first step, you have to find the gravestone of Joseph Stone King of Stone King Cemetery. First step, done. Second step, if you read the inscription on his gravestone, which reads, "Dear children, as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so soon you'll be. Prepare for death and follow me." Now, if you read this at the cemetery, the dare is that a portal to hell will open up and try to swallow you in. Believe it or not, I've talked to many people who claim that when they read this, they felt an intense heat rise out of this portal. They could see the flames coming toward them. But unfortunately, most of them didn't stick around long enough to find out what this really was. Those who didn't survive probably to tell me about it. This was a very common inscription of that time, of the 1940s and 1950s. The witnesses that have seen this, they were a little shy and embarrassed to tell me about it because they knew how it sounded. A portal to hell in Iowa? But what they didn't realize is that over the last 20 plus years, I've collected nearly half a dozen places in Iowa that all claim to have a similar portal to hell that will open up and get you. In fact, I've collected so many of these stories, I'm just waiting for that national headline to come out, Iowa, portal to hell. But if you'd rather not take this dare, I recommend you head over to Marshalltown Cemetery. Hold on, we'll get right back to that in a minute. Here we go. Riverside Cemetery in Marshalltown. Because here you have the unique opportunity to take one of my favorite dares in the entire state. And that has to do with the chair that people call the death chair, the devil's chair, or the cursed chair. It's a cement chair that sits in the middle of the cemetery. Nobody knows why it's there. Cemetery records indicate that there may have been 3 concrete chairs at one time. There's only 1 remaining, but they have no historical information as to why it's there, who paid for it, or why it's positioned where it is. But that's not the scary part. The scary part deals in the fact that the dare is that if you're brave enough or foolish enough to sit or stand or merely touch this chair, you'll be cursed with bad luck until the day you die, and it might even take your life. Every year I hear from many people who claim that while visiting the chair, they had bad luck. They broke up with their significant other. They were involved in a car accident. They lost their employment. All kinds of mishap, misfortune, or even death will occur if you sit in that chair. I spoke not too long ago in Marshalltown. After the program, a woman came up to me and told me as a child, she went out to the cemetery with her Girl Scout group. They wanted to learn the history of their legend. And all of them were afraid to sit in the chair except one little girl who was brave. She sat in it and they all left. Well, now this woman told me they recently had a reunion and everybody showed up to that reunion except one lady who had died previously. Anyone want to guess which person that was? The girl who sat in that chair, allegedly. Now, I've collected so many stories of people being cursed by this chair that I've come to the firm conclusion that only a complete fool would ever sit in that chair. Oh, well, here I am. You can see I've sat dozens of times in that chair, and luckily, I'm still here with you this evening. But let's go back. Sorry, let's rewind to right here. Welcome. It's also here in the cemetery at this mausoleum where the legend is that a man buried his wife in the mausoleum. The only problem was he buried her while she was still alive. And now many people will see her spirit walking on the outside of this mausoleum. Other witnesses I've investigated told me things of hearing, "I'm in here, dig me up, please, somebody save me, I'm alive." I looked for any indication of a woman being buried in the mausoleum alive. I couldn't find any. Of course, I couldn't rule it out either. Which begs the question, was anyone ever buried alive? Is it anything more than an urban legend? Well, yes, we know thousands of people were buried alive. How do we know this? We have thousands of people, thousands of newspaper accounts from the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, back then, whether you were in a diabetic shock or in a coma, doctors would often pronounce you dead. But lo and behold, many people, some of which were even at their own funeral, popped up just in the nick of time to be saved from being buried alive. This may seem a little silly today for us to fear it with modern science and medicine, but our grandparents were so afraid of being buried alive, they came up with several inventions, one of which is called a cemetery bell. And it did, or does, exactly what it looks like it would do. It was a bell that would sit above your grave with a rope on a pole going down into your casket. So if you awoke and found yourself buried alive, all you'd have to do is ring that bell and it would alert the caretaker who lived there that you had been buried alive and they could come and rescue you. But there was one problem with this invention, though. On many nights, the wind would set these bells off, giving the caretaker quite a scare, thinking everybody had been buried alive. There's a lot of argument over the origin of the saying, "saved by the bell." Many contend it's a boxing expression, where others believe it was literally being saved by this bell. Because for several nights after you died, your family would sit around your grave making sure that you were truly dead. They'd be working the graveyard shift. And if they heard you ring the bell, you became a dead ringer. Believe it or not. So you don't have to go to the Marshalltown Cemetery to press your luck. In fact, you don't have to go very far at all. You can head to Iowa City to Oakland Cemetery, home of the infamous Black Angel of Death. It was rumored that a woman put this angel there for her husband, who during his life had many affairs, and she wanted the angel to look over him. And now it is said that this angel will turn a darker shade of black every year from the souls that it harvests throughout the year. There are so many legends about the Black Angel of Death that when you go there, they even have a pamphlet about all the different legends of this creature or thing. Many people go here to see the Black Angel, and they often report that it will move around and fly around the cemetery on its own. In fact, many people I've talked to who have seen this told me that they were not so much afraid by the fact that they had just seen a statue come to life, but by the fact that when they looked back, the statue was right back in its original location as though nothing had happened. But of course, my favorite part involves the dare, or should I say dares. And there are many of them, all resulting in death. Some of them are, if you go here at midnight and have a kiss under the statue, you will die. If you go there and touch the statue, you will die. If you go there and you're a virgin, you will die. If you go there and you're not a virgin, you will die. Basically, if you go here, you're going to die. So many people have gone here and tried this out. And again, I hear from people who have bad luck stories after this that, again, they were involved in all kinds of bad luck, misfortune, and mishap. Last time I was there, which I've been there many times, I was there for the night with several other investigators. We were taking photos, investigating, interviewing witnesses, and then the morning came and we took off heading up to a different location in Iowa when all of a sudden I got a speeding ticket. First speeding ticket I had received in 20 plus years. Was it the curse of the Black Angel or just a coincidence? Well, if it was the curse, I consider myself getting off lightly with only a speeding ticket rather than certain death or mishap. Does anyone recognize this location? I'm sorry, bad joke, cornfield in Iowa. But you will recognize this when I tell you this is the place where music died. Sinclair Lake. It was February of 1959. Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper, were all playing a gig at the Surf Ballroom. Buddy Holly was upset because their tour bus kept freezing up on them. So he hired a plane to take him and a couple other people off to the Fargo, North Dakota, Moorhead, Minnesota region for their next gig. But they never made it. Soon after takeoff, that plane crashed in the field in Clear Lake, killing all three musicians along with the young, inexperienced pilot. They didn't report it arriving in Fargo, so they sent a search team and they found the wreckage in this field. And now the field is a memorial for the three artists and the pilot. Many people take comfort and solace in the fact that the music of these artists will continue on forever. Others believe that it's more than the music that's continuing on, because while they venture out to pay their respects, they hear the sound of music being played, but no origin can be found. Others report seeing or hearing what appears to be a plane crashing into the field. Yet when they investigate, again, nothing can be found. But my favorite accounts come from people who are passing by unsuspecting motorists when all of a sudden they see what appears to be the ghostly image of Buddy Holly himself walking down the road or by the field. He's often complete with his trademark glasses. Well, if it is the ghost of Buddy Holly, he seems to be busier in death than he was in life, because about a half a dozen places all claim to be the home of Buddy Holly's ghost, including the Surf's Ballroom in downtown Clear Lake. Now, with Halloween fast approaching, many of you are looking for a creepy story, a really scary book and a movie for you to get into the Halloween spirit. So those of you who have a very strong stomach and can handle horror and scary movies and books, I recommend you check out the sappy love story, The Bridges of Madison County. If you really want to terrify your loved ones, try sitting through Meryl Streep's accent in the movie. But I recommend you skip both of these and head right to Winterset and go to the Bridges of Madison County. In fact, Roseman Bridge. There are many legends of this bridge being haunted. One of the most known versions is of a boy falling in love with a girl in town. Her father did not like the arrangement, framed him for a murder he did not commit. Townsfolk trapped him down in the middle of the bridge. Legend is they threw a rope up over the rafters and took his life at the end of that rope. And since that time, the bridge is thought to be haunted. Soon after they disposed of this young man, it was said that farmers could not take their horse and buggy over the bridge because they would see balls of light, they would see the ghostly image of the boy hanging there, and their horses seemed to pick up on something unseen and refuse to go over the bridge. Unfortunately, you can no longer drive your horse and buggy over the bridge, but you can walk out to the middle of the bridge. That's where many people have seen and heard what appears to be a noose swaying and creaking from the rafters, but when they investigate, nothing can be found. Others have seen the ghostly image of a man in the bridge, but when they get close, they'll hear a big bang and the man will simply vanish. But believe it or not, this is not even the strangest bridge you have here in Iowa. That one may just go to the Mentz Bridge near the Mud River. And it's here that is thought to be haunted, this bridge, by a gentleman who is said to have driven his truck off into the water and he drowned and he met his watery grave. But it's not his spirit that is haunting the place. It has morphed and progressed, and it has turned into what many are calling the Mentz Mud Monster. This giant Bigfoot-looking creature caked with mud, and it seems to be muddy from the water. It comes up and chases people. My favorite part, as you probably guessed, is the dare that involves this bridge. So what is the dare? Well, let's take a look. I'm here at the infamous Mentz Bridge, home of the Iowa Mud Monster. Legend is that if you're brave enough or foolish enough to stand out on this bridge, the Mud Monster will come up from the depths of the river and come after you. So I'm going to see if this monster, this mud beast, is going to attack me. I know you're all wondering if I survived, but... So I was going to let that go the entire 30 minutes I filmed, but I thought you kind of got the point. But what's interesting is even though I wasn't attacked on the days and nights that I was there, people still believe in this mud monster coming up. My favorite part about this case is right next to the location is a campground where you could camp and spend the night if you have that macabre sense of adventure. But there are other things you need to fear in the water outside of the mud monster, and that involves other monsters. Now, I've been all around the world searching for sea monsters and lake monsters. Here I am on one of my expeditions over in Scotland for the Loch Ness Monster. I'm the one over here without the really cool beard. But little did I know I should have stayed right here in the Midwest. In fact, right on the Mississippi River. Today, people love the Mississippi River. Recreation, boating, all kinds of stuff goes on at the river. But back in the early 1900s, people feared the river. They said, do not go near the river because there are giant monsters living in the river. I have dozens of reports of the Mississippi monster, this river monster, even being seen upon dry land. Newspaper articles said it was somewhere over 10 feet long, 250 pounds, 16-inch jaws. Others described it as having a thick armor of scale-like material that a bullet could not even pierce. And then in the 1920s, parents told their children, whatever you do, do not go down by the river, because not only is the monster there, but it's a man-eating monster. Man-eating fish were in the Mississippi River. What happened was many people drowned in the river, which was common. But when they took those bodies out, mostly men, what they found is deep scratch marks on the calves and ankles of these people, as though something grabbed them, dragged them out to the watery grave that they met in the bottom of the river, where they spend eternity. So they feared it was a monster that was drowning all these people. And then around 1930, people said, relax, don't worry. Newspapers said, we figured this mystery out. We solved it. Case closed. It's nothing more than an alligator gar in the river, which is all well and good when you don't know what an alligator gar looks like. But when you see this is an alligator gar, it's a little bit different. Because if a 10-foot long alligator gar swims up against you while you're wading in the Mississippi, you're going to think it's a sea monster. And in fact, it is a river monster. It just happens to be one that we know about. Now, I've spent many expeditions on the river, most recently living on a houseboat for many days and nights with Noah Voss, a noted researcher. There we had underwater cameras, we had sonar, we had fishing equipment. We even jumped in using ourselves as bait, but luckily or unluckily, Peppy, the creature of the Mississippi River, did not appear. But the people of Lake City, Minnesota, which sits on Lake Pepin, which is a lake on the Mississippi River, dividing Wisconsin and Minnesota, they believe that Peppy, the lake monster, is so real, or at least that you'll come looking for it, that they've offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of this lake monster. The only stipulation is you cannot hurt the creature while you try to capture it. So whether you use a fishing pole, a net, or you just old-fashioned wrestle it to shore, you cannot hurt it while trying to capture it. Remember a few years ago, you couldn't go anywhere, turn on any television without hearing about UFOs. TV shows like on X-Files and shows like Unsolved Mysteries, movies like Men in Black, Independence Day. It was everywhere. Now, skeptics claim that the only reason people are seeing UFOs today is because of the media. Shows like these have told us we should see UFOs, so that's why people see UFOs. But what you'll see is that people were spotting things in the sky long before Mulder and Scully were out there investigating. In fact, Iowa has a rich history of UFO reports dating back to the 1800s. You had many flaps or rashes of airships being seen, or mysterious balls of light. One of the strangest cases ever to take place in Iowa happened or began with a UFO sighting. And it happened in Van Meter, Iowa in 1903 during this very time period so many years ago. Now, Van Meter sits about 20 miles southwest of Des Moines. And there in 1903, they were attacked by a monster of awful form, a winged monster, Des Moines' new monster. It all began when a local resident was coming home one night, about 1 a.m., when he saw what appeared to be a ball of light hovering on one of the buildings. He thought it was burglars or intruders, so he slowed down, tried to get a closer look. The light disappeared, reappeared on the other building across the street in a matter of seconds, and then vanished into thin air. He didn't know what it was. It was a UFO. The next day, he started talking about it. People thought he was crazy until a doctor the next night was awoken in the middle of the night with a bright light shining in his window. About 1 a.m., he got up, went outside with his gun, which the newspaper said was of immense proportions. And when he went outside, he was confronted by this creature. He said it was an 8-foot tall bat-like creature with giant leather wings. It had a horn on its head, and it could produce a light out of that horn. Over the next several days, many people saw this creature. Some said that when they shot at it, it released an odor that erased their memory for the rest of the night. That as soon as they shot at this creature, they could remember nothing else. But dozens of people shot at it. It was either impervious to weapons, or the people of Van Meter were the worst shots in Iowa. But it had no effect on this creature. For 5 nights, the creature terrorized the most prominent people in Van Meter. Then they finally discovered that the creature seemed to be coming from an old abandoned coal mine on the outskirts of town near a brick and tile factory. So a posse of men gathered at that brick and tile factory. And then on the last night of the sightings, just before the sun came up, the creature came back. And it was accompanied by a smaller creature, almost identical in look, but just smaller. Maybe the female gender of the species, or an offspring. And the newspaper said that the posse let loose with so much gunfire they could have sunk the Spanish fleet. The creatures themselves, they descended into that old abandoned coal mine. And like a great Hollywood thriller, that's where the story leaves off. We don't know what happened. Did they kill the creatures? Did they go on to become the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia? We don't know. Eventually, the coal mine was abandoned and filled up. Here's what it looks like today. You wouldn't even know that underneath me, they had miles of tunnels. They had stables of donkeys working down there. But even though many people in the area forgot the legend of the Van Meter visitor, many people believed the old brick and tile factory was still haunted. They would go out there at night, mostly young kids, college age, and see what appeared to be bricks flying across the room as though thrown by some unseen force. Others would see a shadowy form moving out in that area, only to blame it on ghosts or hauntings because they did not know the history of the Van Meter visitor. Every year on the anniversary of the sightings, the people of Van Meter throw together a Van Meter Visitor Festival. It's always the last weekend in September. You just missed it. But you can go there next year and actually visit some of the sites where these people saw the creature. In fact, you can even bring your weapons there and start shooting at it yourself if you so choose. But the creature is only one of many here in Iowa. This is a cemetery that's pretty infamous. It is called the Lewis Bottom Cemetery, or the Palo Cemetery in Palo, Iowa. But most people call this 13-step cemetery. Legend is, on many days when you go there during the day and count the steps, you'll either get 12 or 14 steps. But when you go there at night, a mysterious 13th step will appear and guide you into the cemetery. Odd things have been reported for decades. Again, weird balls of light similar to these floating around. Disembodied voices coming from the trees surrounding the area. But my favorite reports come from people who go out there when all of a sudden they see what appear to be hellhounds of the area. Now, these are large black dogs with glowing red or green eyes. They've been reported throughout history in nearly every culture on the planet. Just to show you you're not the only weird people to believe in these creatures, a few years ago I was over in the country of Belize here. I was searching for a jungle protector that they called the Tata Duende. And everywhere I went, villagers said, you better get back here before dark while looking for the Duende, because if you're not back before the sun goes down, you might encounter one of our hellhounds, which they called cadeos. And if these creatures see you, they will connect with you and steal your energy. And unless you could find a powerful shaman or a bush doctor, you'd be dead within a week of seeing these creatures. So being the researchers that we were, we made it a point to stay out past dark every night. And luckily, I'm still here tonight. If you thought those cases were weird, These next cases are going to be beyond bizarre. First stop, right outside of Fort Dodge, is a little town called Tara, T-A-R-A. But the locals, they don't call this Tara Bridge. They call it Terror Bridge because they believe it's haunted by many things, one of which is that of a phantom train. Many people will go out here and they'll see a train and its lights out in the distance. They'll feel the rumbling on the tracks. They'll hear the whistle of the train, but the train never appears. Others talk about it being haunted by a pile driver, a gentleman who was driving stakes into the ground when one came up and decapitated him. In fact, I have newspaper articles dating back to the 1800s talking about ghost hunters from Fort Dodge going out to Terror Bridge because they would see that ghost of the pile driving man and the ghost of that train roaming through the area. But over the years, the stories have shifted. And one of the most recent stories tells of a woman many years ago who was distraught. She had a psychotic break. She took her children out to the bridge, and together they waited, and they waited. Soon, a train came barreling by, and one by one, she dumped her children over the side of the bridge onto that oncoming train where they met their fate. When she was done disposing of her children, she joined them and jumped to her death as well. And now the legend is that when you go out here, not only will you see and hear the ghostly images of those children that met their end there, but the dare is that if you park your car on this bridge and you do not lock your doors and windows, the ghostly spirit of that murdering mother will try to throw you over to your death on the train tracks below. Last time I was out there, I was with Noah Voss and noted researcher Kevin Lee Nelson. They were up on the train track, the trestle here. I was down below. Not only did they not lock their doors and windows, they got out and came over to the side of the bridge. They were up there hoping that this woman would throw them over. I was down here filming, praying that she would throw them over. But unfortunately for me and luckily for them, she did not throw them over. But believe it or not, the case gets more bizarre because dating back to the same period in the 1800s, we have cases of many unsuspecting people using their horseback going through the area when all of a sudden they saw what they reported to be, well, maybe I better let you just take a look. This creature. For lack of a better term, they call it a werewolf. It was the size of a bear, but shaped more like a wolf with a long muzzle and deep, dark, matted down fur. Witnesses that I've spoken with who have seen this creature were terrified that it seemed to be a biped, meaning it walked and ran upright on its hind legs like you and I do. But again, don't worry, you're not the only weird people to see werewolves out in the Terror Bridge area. Thanks to my good friend and colleague, Linda Godfrey, my home state of Wisconsin is now known as the werewolf capital of the world. It all began when Linda was working as a journalist in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. She started getting reports from people that were driving down a small stretch of rural road called Bray Road. That's when they started seeing, very similar to the Terror area, a werewolf-type creature. Often on the side of the road at night, but not always. Sometimes it was seen eating freshly killed roadkill or killed prey. The good news is that outside of charging a few vehicles, the creature seems to be just as frightened of witnesses as they are of it, and it would rather just retreat into the woods than chase after somebody who sees it. Since Linda's books first came out, I get reports all over the United States from people seeing these large werewolf-like creatures. But I want you to keep in mind that not all monsters look like this. In fact, some monsters are even scarier than this because some monsters tend to look a little bit more like this. Now, as I said, I'm a lifelong resident of Wisconsin, and we've been known to have a couple weird people come from my state. Anyone recognize this gentleman? Anyone? Go ahead. Very good. Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield, Wisconsin. If you don't know Ed's story or you forgot it from the 1940s and 1950s, you might recall some of the movies they based on his life, including Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and dozens of others. Now, most people just remember Ed as a murderer, and true, he was a murderer. He murdered 2 people that we know of, probably half a dozen more, including his own brother. But before he was captured in Plainfield, he was well liked in the community. He would babysit for kids and bring his neighbors over what he called a venison stew for them to eat. I had one neighbor told me he had received this, his mother got this stew from Ed, and the mother had said that it was such a bad smell to it, she threw it away, which is a good thing for her because even though Ed was a murderer, his real passion was to wait until it got dark. Then he would fire up his truck and for decades head down to the nearby cemeteries where he would dig up the recently deceased remains of women that reminded him of his own dead mother. He would then bring those remains back to his farmhouse. Now, a word of caution here. If you have any young people in the audience tonight, they're going to want to close their eyes. If you just had supper, you're going to want to close your eyes. If you have a squeamish stomach, actually, everybody just please close your eyes right now because I'm going to show you what Geen did to those bodies. And believe me, these next 2 slides are gruesome, they're graphic, they're gory. You may not want to see this. I will tell you when the slides are gone, but they are disturbing. I do not want you to come up to me after the program saying, hey, Chad, you should have warned me about those photographs. This is your last warning. Close your eyes. I'll tell you when we're done. Here we go. First thing Geen did, decapitate them, steal the body parts he wanted, the eyes, the ears, the lips, the nose, the tongue. When he was done with that, he would gut them out like a deer, removing their sexual organs, peeling off all their skin. Okay, photos are gone. He would then use that material for lampshades and furniture in his home. When the detectives came in, they walked right out and vomited in his front yard. He had a human heart on the stove, a belt adorned with women's nipples. We won't even get into what he was doing in the bedroom. But when Ed really got a bug in his system, he would make an entire outfit of this human skin, and he would wear it like a demented Halloween costume as he danced under the moonlight in his front yard. But you see, when we finally caught Geen and discovered how truly horrific his crimes were, they wanted to open his house as a museum of horrors that you could visit. But before they did, or before they were able to, it mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Townsfolk torched it, allegedly. When Jeffrey Dahmer got a taste for human skin in Milwaukee, we tore down his apartment complex. My point being here is that in Wisconsin, when tragedy strikes us, we like to get rid of it and pretend that it never ever happened. But you people of Iowa, you're a little bit different. When tragedy strikes you, not only do you not get rid of these places, you turn them in to tourist destinations. That's exactly what's happened at the J.B. Moore home, better known as the Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca. Here you have the terrible story of June 1912, the J.B. Moore family, which had 4 children, 2 of them are missing, it seems, on this photo, and they had a couple friends spending the night with them. The next morning, the usually rambunctious family was nowhere to be seen. Researchers believe that while they came home, someone or several people were there waiting for them, and at night, they went room by room with an axe, killing every single person in the house. The next morning, as I said, when the family could not be seen, neighbors thought it was suspicious. They called the police. The police came in and discovered all the dead bodies. They had no idea how many people were killed because the bodies were in such bad shape. They didn't know if they were dealing with 3 people or 30 people. Word spread through town. People started tramping through the house, bringing bloody footprints everywhere. Even the murder weapon, the axe, was stolen by some curious sightseeker. But the house is still there and is believed to be haunted. Many people believe that it's haunted not only by the family, but by the killer or killers. Many people have been investigating when all of a sudden they see what appears to be a young child walking through the house, or they'll hear what appears to be children crying and screaming. Others have seen a man with a bloody axe go through the place. Many tours that go through there, people see things move on their own. But the best part, or maybe the worst part, depending on your macabre sense of adventure, is if you want, you can spend the night in this house. It's available for rent, although it's going to charge you about $400 per night to stay there. Others who don't want to brave it can take a daytime tour where just as many reports come from the day tours as they do at night. I love this because you can't sleep on the furniture, you have to lay on the floor, and many people don't even make it through the night when they stay there. Other groups, including myself, have brought little toys, period toys, and put them on the ground hoping that the children would play with them. As I said, you can spend the night here. You probably won't be able to get in before October is over. It's booked up for a very long time, as I can't imagine how many people like to spend the night there. But as I'm running low on time, I'm going to end with the type of case that you haven't heard me talk about tonight because it's a private home. And many people who live in a house that is thought to be haunted, they don't want it to be known that their house is haunted. That's why this is not even an accurate drawing of the house I'm going to tell you about. When I was last here many, many years ago, a gentleman came up to me after the program, told me the story of a house he lived in here in the area. He thought it was odd because at night he would hear the kids running up and down the stairs. Problem was, he said he didn't have kids in the house. At night, while going to sleep, he would see and feel an indentation on his bed as though somebody sat down. All kinds of odd music would play through the house, but he could never find the origin of it. All kinds of traditional haunted stuff would happen too. Lights flickering on and off, doors moving on their own, mysterious rapping and knocking on the doors and windows. Finally, he said many years ago, he moved out of this house and he vowed that he would never return because he thought it was so haunted. But here's the kicker. I'm not going to tell you where this house is here in the area because tonight, when all of you go home and put your head down on your pillows and you hear the wind rustling outside your window, I want you to ask yourself, how much do you really know about the history of your house? And is it possible not only that you're living in a haunted house, but you could be living in the very same house that I'm talking about right now? So with that, I wanted to save the last 10 minutes or so that we have for any questions, comments, or stories that any of you might have. If you want more information, my website has more than you could ever want or need. But I really hope your adventure does not stop here tonight at the library. Grab one of my books, go on your own adventure of Iowa. And when you do, I think you'll discover that you live in one hell of a weird state. And I mean that in a good way. You're going to see things you've never seen. You'll meet some odd people. And maybe along the way, you might just discover that the strangest thing out there is yourself. So with that in mind, I'll open it up for any questions, comments, or stories from any of you. Normally, I bring a friend in the audience to get the questions going, but you're too far from Eau Claire for me to have brought someone. So let me get the backlights on, and I'll open it up if you have any questions or stories. Any questions? You let me off the hook very easy tonight. I just did a program at a university in front of 400 drunken, rowdy college students, so this is a nice change. Not saying you're not drunk, but yeah, way in the back.
Do you have a personal experience that sparked your interest in these kinds of things?
Actually, no. I blame it on my home state of Wisconsin that we have 3 UFO capitals of the world in Wisconsin, 3 different cities. And I grew up near one of them. And in high school, I heard about people seeing UFOs in the sky. So I was just about to study psychology at college. And I went to Elmwood, Wisconsin, interviewing people why they saw what their reports were. And When I started studying psychology, I was more interested in why some people believe in the paranormal and others do not. What is it about human perception or belief systems? So I started researching and presenting at college research conventions, symposiums, and people in the audience would come up and say, I know this isn't what you're really doing, but I think my home's haunted, or I saw some creature in the woods I can't explain, could you help me out? And that's where I really started from there, and it just went through grad school and beyond. 20 plus years later, it expanded to out-of-body experiences, telepathy, crop circles, cryptozoology, and the like. Yeah, anything weird and unusual, which in the Midwest, I've yet to run out of topics. Yeah. Yes, sir.
As the population of certain areas have increased, have you noticed like less and less supernatural tales from those areas, or different types of tales, or has it been kind of the same types of stories across time?
Yeah, interesting is you would think everyone thinks of the rural places. Everyone knows the town legend and that old abandoned house has to be haunted, but I get so many reports from very populated places you wouldn't think of, Chicago, Milwaukee, and they're a little bit different. Oftentimes, they don't take place in a secluded graveyard. They take place usually around real-life events. Like in Milwaukee, the Ambassador Hotel in downtown Milwaukee is thought to be haunted because Jeffrey Dahmer spent nights there killing people and cutting up their body and putting them in a trunk. And don't worry, it's a really nice place now, but back then it wasn't. In the 1980s, it was a cesspool, but today it's a very upscale place. And what I find fascinating is that when I started doing the Wisconsin book back in 2002, wherever we went, whether it was a B&B, a hotel, a restaurant, people would say, don't put us in your book because if people find out we're haunted, nobody's going to come here. And then they said, go ahead, who's going to read that book anyway? And now we get reports from them saying, thanks so much for putting us in the book. It's really become a tourist destination. There are so many places that have haunted tours. If you're a touristy town, some places, if you're lucky enough to live in Key West, Florida, they have 3 different haunted tours to choose from. So, and even in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they were doing a Dahmer tour for a while until feedback came back that it was too soon, but they would take a bus to all the gay bars that Dahmer picked up his victims at, and you could recreate it. And, but every year people still get trespassing tickets from Ed Gein's farm. The land's still there, the barn's not, but people still go there because they think Gein's haunting the place, and they get usually a trespassing ticket. Yeah. But great question. I love these stories do progress and morph over the years. I talk to sometimes many seniors that remember stories when they were kids, and then you talk to teenagers and they tell you a different version of that story. So over the years, it's moved on. Like the Terror Bridge, it started out as being this ghost of the train and the pile driving worker, and then it became the woman who lost her mind, and then the werewolf stories recirculated. So these things do go around in a circular fashion. Any other stories?
Oh, you were showing cemeteries. The first cemetery you showed, you didn't tell what patient.
Oh, well, let's go back and see it.
The first one you showed.
Give me a minute. I have no idea which one that is.
Was the very first one.
Oh, right here, Williamson, Stone King Cemetery.
Where?
Williamson. Yep, tiny town, not too far from Independence, which is about an hour and a half north of here.
Okay.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, I was in right next to Independence last night giving a presentation, and a family came up to me after the program and said, we live in Williamson. We know that cemetery. You forgot to mention the beer story. I said, what? I'm from Wisconsin. I love beer stories. And they said that their story they've heard their whole lives is that when you go out here, and if you put a can of beer on Joseph Stone King's grave, the dare or legend is that you will not be able to lift it off of there, that it'll sit there. But every time I've gone there, there are no beer cans left behind. But so that's another version that has just popped up, at least to me, that I had never heard that part of the legend over the years. But these things do morph and grow.
All right, about the Stone King Cemetery.
Yeah.
So the Stone King, I told stories, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but actually the tombstone of Mr. Stone King was actually shown in the movie Children of the Corn.
Yeah, that's the legend. You can watch the movie. There are no cemeteries in there, but I was just in Iowa here last weekend for a horror festival, and I confirmed it. I've sat through that movie, The Children of the Corn. It's a fun movie with Malachi and all the rest. But yeah, it wasn't, it thought it was in there, but no, just a legend, which a lot of these are. But what I love these stories is people still remember them. The last time I was out at the Buddy Holly crash, it was during the summer on a Thursday afternoon, about 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon. And I was amazed at how many people were coming in, dozens of people in the afternoon on a Tuesday or Thursday, whatever it was. You know, they were there. I was only there for about 2 hours and a couple dozen people came. So people still go to these places. People of a certain age in the audiences will always tell me they remember going to middle school or grade school during the 50s and hearing, or early 60s, and hearing the Gein jokes, that the people joked about Ed Gein because it was so horrific they had to, and it was, national jokes. And one woman stood up and recited "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" all about Ed Gein. She had learned it as a kid and it stuck in her memory, and it was creepy. I said, don't do that. But that's half the fun. People always ask, do you get scared going to these places? And I always say, if you're not getting scared, you're not trying hard enough, because these places are just downright creepy. Even if you have zero psychic ability like myself, you can't help but to get creeped out at some of these locations just knowing the grisly history. Maybe one more, sure.
Yeah, have you investigated the Lynn County Mental Health Facility closed down 3 years ago? It's on the outskirts of Cedar Rapids.
I haven't. Tell me about it if you would.
Yeah, a year ago I was with the Johnson County Paranormal team run by Greg Reisner. I don't know if you've ever met him.
No.
And we went in there one Saturday night. The place was locked up and they had to have the police come and let you in. Huge place, hundreds and hundreds of rooms. And the place has been vandalized because vandals have been breaking in there. And supposedly it's haunted. The cops won't go in there at night. They're scared to death of the place. So we went in there. It was the first time with this team, first time doing any of that. And they had a cell block at one end of the building where some unfortunate had hung himself, I think, shortly before they closed the place. And he got a good photograph with an infrared camera of a spirit orb with contrail flying past the back of my head. It was kind of freaky.
Did you notice anything?
Not until he said it, no.
Okay, sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. You bring up a good point that nearly any type of place can and usually does have a haunted story. Old mental asylums, sanitariums, tuberculosis theaters, schools, even restaurants that you wouldn't think of, Subway and other crazy places that don't seem that scary. But it just shows that these places are everywhere. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I think I'm going to end it here. I will stick around if you want to tell me a story in private, ask a question. If you want to grab a book from me, stop back to my table, grab as many free postcards from me as you'd like. You can terrorize your in-laws and your family with them because this is the postcard. You can scare them. But again, I'd like to thank the library for having me here tonight. It's very rare you can come to a program like this at no cost. You can check a wealth of information out from the library. It's a real treasure. So if you like programs like this, let them know so you get more of these. If you didn't like tonight's program, let them know so you get fewer of these. But either way, they put a lot of work into getting me here during October, and they should be applauded, and thank you all for coming.